So welcome back to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. And back with us as a guest from the UK is Mike Kocsis. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, thanks for having me again on here. It seems like every time I'm coming on, I'm whinging about some problem with some either regulatory body or government or the newspapers but I've got some interesting news today, and I wanted to share this with everyone who subscribes to your channel to let them know and put their minds at ease by giving them an explanation of what's going on here in the UK. It might give people some tips around the world about how to manage when this happens to you in your country. And so that's essentially what I posted on my channel, Balance Your Hormones, was the supply shortage of Sustanon. And we had a little bit of a clickbaity type title called, Sustanon Game Over, because essentially that's what we're feeling is it really worth, trusting the supply of Sustanon as your go-to for TRT? Though someone else pointed out a double meaning, saying that game over, is that replying to balance my hormones? But no, we're just getting started. So no, that doesn't mean that. But actually, one of my employees had mentioned it. What we're trying to talk about and let people know is since probably December or end of December, early January, we've been hearing rumblings out there about patients not being able to get their Sustanon. Now, that wasn't the case at my pharmacy, at my clinic, because we have been able to manage our supply in the right way, and we specialize in hormones, so we would of course have enough to cover our patients, and we have a certain quota to match it. But we were hearing rumblings out on forums and other locations. We noticed a few times supplies and deliveries didn't come as expected from the wholesaler, and we were told it's just a minor disruption, which can happen sometimes in the supply chain. We weren't aware of is how long this was going to last, and when we got an additional supply at one point, I believe it was in January, a few more supplies, and then nothing, and we were waiting and we're waiting and waiting. And so, it's very frustrating when you don't know when you're going to be able to supply your patients, and you've got orders piling and piling up, and you need to satisfy that demand. And so fortunately, we have other options. I'm not dependent. There are some clinics in the UK in particular who depend on other outside pharmacies and allow the patients just to go willy-nilly get their prescriptions filled in kind of the old-fashioned model. But that has caused disruptions themselves. So when one pharmacy doesn't have it or they run out, then patients look at other pharmacies and they run out as well. And any backups that would be changed to would run out. So that's what we've seen across the board. Because of some adversity I'd gone through as the pharmacy owner and owner of Balance Your Hormones, I was able to prepare for this eventuality. It made me think, well, how do we, manage this in future? So I was able to have some backups in place. And one of those backups, is testosterone cypionate, testosterone enanthate. We'd like to have a full, arsenal of different hormones or different testosterones available, because I've always said there isn't one gold standard testosterone treatment. It's a treatment that's going to work best for an individual patient. And look, Sustanon is a bunch of different esters. Esters are fatty acid molecules, some are longer, some are shorter chains. At the end of the day, it's testosterone. Some patients may do better with these based on the formulations, based on the excipients. For instance, testosterone enanthate that comes from certain manufacturers has arachis oil, similar to what Sustanon has. Sustanon has arachis oil. And for some patients, this arachis oil can be irritating. Sometimes the arachis oil, and we found in the enanthate that we've not seen any irritation with that particular formulation of testosterone, but we do see it with Sustanon. So perhaps it is a combination of maybe the benzoyl alcohol concentration in Sustanon that we're not seeing with the other preparations that use arachis oil. But even so, if you have an allergy to peanuts or soy, potentially, you don't want to use something with arachis oil in. So yeah, having a backup has helped. But what's so frustrating, and what I try to emphasize in my video was, we had no timeline. So this is going on all the month of January, all the month of February, and we've got no supply. So our supply of Sustanon had lasted us up until, I'd say, about the beginning of February, because we was properly allocated and we matched our quota. But once that ran out, it was like, what are we going to do? When will the supply come back? And I was calling the wholesaler, I was calling the manufacturer. Some people didn't want to tell me what was going on, so that was the most frustrating part. because we felt like we deserved to have an answer so we can tell our patients what to expect. Because let's face it, when patients, especially patients who are newly prescribed testosterone, it can be anxiety with them, and patients don't understand. So one of the tips I wanted to give to your viewers and to any of our patients watching is that you start with the testosterone, you stay on the testosterone that you're prescribed. One of the things people should realize is that when they go on testosterone, throughout their life, there may be many supply chain disruptions, and you may be put on many different types of testosterone. And the bottom line is that little medication, this little box, it doesn't matter what it says on the box as long as you're getting testosterone. And knowing that, as my good friend Dr. Krieger from California said, when I first started wondering what would happen if I ran out of testosterone, he said, you'll never run out of testosterone. Life always finds a way so that you can get your medication. And that's a little bit what I'm trying to tell people, is that through our own resource, through our preparation, for our patients, we've got them covered. We'll do the best that we can to move them over to alternatives, just being aware that you can switch to alternatives. And even if it's not ideal, but a few days out to a week out, you're not going to become hypogonadal overnight again. But that is the anxiety that men have, right? If they're going to miss it, then somehow they're going to revert to their former state. And no one wants that. And we don't want people to have the fear and anxiety around that. So we do the best we can to minimize it. But what I wanted to let them know is it's okay. I've switched personally. Prior to all my years of using Sustanon, it was Cypionate. I was prescribed Cypionate in the United States. It was the standard there. Or enanthate wasn't really prescribed much in the US, but I guess it depends on the region and where you are. And then, living and working in the UK, Sustanon was a go-to. And people will ask us, and say, well, why does Balancer Hormones prescribe Sustanon at all? I think a lot of people don't realize that in certain countries, like I think in Belgium, Sustanon is licensed. In the Netherlands, Sustanon is a licensed product. In the UK, it's licensed. So what it means to be licensed is you've got a marketing authorization as a company, Aspen does, to sell the product. And some of the guidelines around good medical practice is that the doctor should prescribe what's licensed in the country of origin. So we've got very few choices if that were the case. But fortunately, unlike the United States, which is very much a closed loop system, you can really only get FDA approved medications, and anything else has to have a very, very special permissions from the FDA. And if it's controlled substances, the DEA, you can't bring in those medications. So we're fortunate in Europe because we have agreements with other European countries, even after Brexit, in order to import these medications. And that's what we've been able to do. And they're considered unlicensed, but the doctor should always be prescribing the licensed medication first. And so we try to be ethical, follow those guidance. And that's what we've been doing. And we think that was the right thing to do. But we also had instances or cases where the medication that was licensed doesn't always suit the patient's needs. So at the same time, we've also had the testosterone cypionate, which we've had for years now, testosterone propionate, testosterone enanthate in a smaller form, a smaller package, which means patients aren't wasting the other half of the medication. It means patients are getting more precise dosing, even the multi-dose vials of cypionate, to have that on offer. So to kind of match up with what I've said in the past, American style TRT, but with British sensibilities. And that's what we're trying to do, have those offerings. So if you are, a person living in the United States and you moved over to Europe or the UK, we can pretty much match what you're on in the USA. And this has happened before. So anyway, getting back to the story, what's happened. So when I discovered through calling the different manufacturers or the manufacturer of Sustanon, and there was some information that they were telling me, essentially they said the Home Office was blocking this. So again, they wouldn't confirm nor deny what was actually happening, but the sense of it is the Home Office, for whatever reason, either didn't renew the license for the manufacturer or didn't renew it in time, possibly because the manufacturer either forgot or was late or had incorrect information on their application. And so they were punished by the Home Office. Now, people say, well, what would the Home Office have to do with it? They have to do with immigrants. They have to do with, but in the UK, the Home Office, a portion of the remit is to manage domestic licenses for medications. Anything that's a controlled substance, if you possess a controlled substance, not if you're a pharmacy, but if you're like a wholesale dealer, a manufacturer, they would need to have a license renewed every year. They're not cheap. I think they're like $5,000 to renew them with the Home Office. Maybe a little bit less than that. But it's just a lot of paperwork. You have to have an inspection. They need to make sure that everything's locked up and secured properly. It's just a bureaucracy. That's what you have to do. In addition, if you're handling medications, you also have to have a wholesale dealer's license, a manufacturer's license, which goes to the equivalent of the FDA, called the MHRA. And I think, what's it called in Europe now? We used to have it here in the UK. but it was the EU version of European Medicine Agency, EMA.
Yeah, EMA, yeah.
So that's, essentially what you have to deal with. So because of all these different regulators, and this is my point why regulation to this degree doesn't make any sense. What they should have done, they should have MHRA handle any medicinal product that's controlled and just leave the Home Office to regulate cocaine or whatever other drugs that should not be part of medicines. But that's just the way it is in the UK, a little bit clunky and very much dragging you down with this bureaucracy. So anyway, I called the Home Office, as I said in my video, and I was asking, hey, what's going on with this particular situation with Sustanon? And they wouldn't speak to me. They wouldn't speak to me at all. Like, oh, how dare you call us? Like, well, I'm a concerned patient advocate, right? We've got patients that need their medication. He said, we won't tell you about the specific case. I said, okay, well, let me ask you about a hypothetical case. And that's what I brought up. I'm a hypothetical pharmaceutical company. We forgot to renew our license in time. What's the worst that's going to happen to us? I said, are you going to pull off our fingernails, chop off our hands? Are you going to, how serious is the punishment? And they didn't go down too well, actually, telling that story. But he said, well, I don't know where you're going with this conversation. I said, well, I'd just like to know. I'd like to know what is the worst that could happen. He said, well, that's the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 or 72, and very, very serious. I said, okay, well, how soon would this hypothetical company be able to get back up and running? He said, oh, we can't say when it would happen. And he was just very, very quiet on that topic. I said, well, what would happen? I said, how would you feel about the fact that based on what you guys are doing, you're hurting, patients who really very much need their medication? He said, it's not really up to us, and we've got no feeling about it at all. He said, all we care about is the regulation. And that's essentially, and you'll find this in any country, really. You'll get this certain group of people, the control freaks, I call them, that just want to, they don't care. And there's no priority, there's no sense of urgency. And then they wonder why patients are, dissatisfied with the level of care. And this just doesn't affect private care. This also affects NHS patients. And we even had, I did say in my video, we even at the pharmacy, I don't even advertise my pharmacy. It's there to service and support balance my hormones. But we had patients calling us because as a pharmacy, based on the nature of our license, we have to have a website. Patients found us, called us from the NHS because they couldn't get their medication on the NHS. And they were switched from Sustanon to enanthate, but there was a run on enanthate, so there's no enanthate left. And they were asking if there's anything that we can do. So that's how frustrating it is for patients and how sad it is that people can't even get their medications. I know some patients have been put on libido as well, or testosterone decanoate as an alternative. So that's what's happened. I was frustrated. I put out the video. I think we even tagged Rishi Sunak in the Home Office. And the final bit of the story, as I said in my video, was they did give me a little hint, the Home Office, and they said, well, in order to unlodge it, the Home Office would have to get permission from the Department of Health. And that's a whole nother bureaucracy to go through. You can't even get a hold of anyone. I did what I thought was my good citizen duty, and I reported to the supply chain people in the Department of Health. Got a few emails back, but it was very top level, and no one really recognized that they knew that this problem existed. They just took my information and left it at that. I had a few inside contacts that I tried to message on LinkedIn, that I tried to email, and they just either went on holiday or didn't read the emails, or buried it. So we got nowhere with them. And then finally this week, just out of curiosity, I thought, well, who knows how long this is going to go on. Let me give the manufacturer a call. And to my surprise, and I was whinging and complaining all morning, thinking, we have to just prepare that there will be no more Sustanon. And like I put in my video, Sustanon game over. We found out, again, questionable if we believe them because we've been down this path before, but they said, and maybe by the time this video is out, they said, the Sustanon will be coming back, and pharmacies that have licenses or have the agreements with the wholesaler can place their orders starting next week. So hopefully by the time the video comes out, people will watch this. They'll have Sustanon trickling back into the market. Balance for hormones patients have been, fine throughout this. For the most part, people were able to get a substitute, and we're really happy that we've been working overtime to do it. And that was the other part about it, Stephen. I mean, I've been rolling up my sleeves, mucking in, calling patients, trying to put their minds at ease, letting them know what's going on, because it's really unfair. Like, these decisions by these regulators don't take into account all the extra work that you have to do as a business to support it. So I mean, we've got lots of staff, but if we have to replenish every single prescription, there's, as a doctor, there's a lot you've got to do. You've got to make sure the blood tests are up to date. You do all these checks before you write a new prescription. You just don't write a new prescription willy-nilly. So there's these very sound checks that have to go into place. And that's what we had to do. So everyone, did what they could to kind of move through the list. So, but anyway, the good news is, hopefully, if we're not being fooled or bamboozled by the by the government and the wholesaler, then we should be getting our supplies back for our patients, and that's good news for the NHS patients and other patients in the UK as well.
Yeah, amazing story, really incredible. And the basic question remains, of course, why is testosterone in the first place a controlled substance, right?
And that was the kind of the big picture that I wanted to talk about. And I'm not the only one that has mentioned this. We know that there's some talk in the United States about, it has to do with almost the trans community pushing this, and comes from the work of Rick Collins. He's mentioned this, but it's a question that anyone who's on testosterone would rightfully ask. You would say, well, during the midst of the estradiol shortage or estrogen shortage, we understood that was an issue due to a manufacturer not getting the supply. There's increase in demand. Okay, we get that, but estrogen is not a controlled substance. So they only have one regulator to deal with, which is the Medicines Agency, or the equivalent of the FDA for the people in America that watch it. But they don't have to have the DEA or the Home Office involved. And that complicates things. It complicates it when you're trying to import the testosterone from other countries, because the DEA gets involved from the USA just to export the medication. It gets involved with just use of it in individual countries, even throughout Europe. You throw in the doping laws as well, and some European countries, you can't get any reasonable testosterone unless it's gels or undecanoate. And so you've got very limited options, and it's going to take you longer to get dialed in, if at all. But I suppose for those unfortunate people in Sweden, Norway, sometimes Denmark, but Denmark is we're not sure which way they're going. It looks like they're leaning more towards their friends in Sweden and the rest of Scandinavia. You do what you do the best you can with the tools that you have. And some testosterone is better than no testosterone, if you're deficient. So, and that's kind of where we sit with that. But no, the controlled substance, and this is what Rick Collins talks about, is very unfair to men. It's almost discriminatory towards men who need this very vital sex hormone. And as a doctor, Stephen, right, the sex steroids, sex hormones, the female sex hormones, estradiol, estrogen, progesterone, the male sex hormone, testosterone. Actually, you get 3 in 1 with testosterone, DHT and estradiol through its conversion and aromatizations. But generally speaking, these are things in your own body. Why is it being controlled? And in some countries like the USA, you can't even possess testosterone. So imagine that. Loads of men and women from puberty on up to adulthood, are walking around with a controlled substance in their body, based on these laws, which is insanity.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah, it probably stems from the bodybuilding misuse.
Yeah, that's what it's funny. I did a quick. Sometimes I use like ChatGPT 3. You have your
Yeah, I've tried it.
Yeah, and I asked ChatGPT, I said, well, what do you make of, before this video, I said controlled substances and testosterone. And what did it say? It's due to abuse. And I said, well, what do you mean by abuse? Oh, it can be used by bodybuilders and used in a non-medical way. Okay, well, so can alcohol, so can many other items, other things that people take. So, paracetamol you can take too much. There are so many medications that can be, but apparently there's stigma around testosterone, and that's what I talked about in my talk in Las Vegas. Is the stigma, I think, pushes people into this. Also, this so-called fairness in sport, and that really makes me angry because yes, I like sport as much as the next person. That should not interfere. Sport and the rules around sport should not interfere with good medical care. That's really unfortunate. Menopause for women, they've got good access to when the supply is there to their sex steroids, to their hormones, and males can't get to testosterone. But you know what? There is a crossover, and women now on HRT are seeing the benefits of testosterone treatment along with the HRT. And so perhaps as this becomes more popular, because it's medically necessary, not because it's just popular, but again, there's always a risk when more and more people gravitate towards something as they learn of the health benefits, then the regulators and the government starts cracking down on it because of there's too many people and they have to control this. And that's frustrating. I think a lot of people, during other times, the other C word that we lived through for 2 years, also saw some of this exercise of governments around the world to control people for much longer than they probably should have done in the name of safety. And so that's when you end up giving away some of your freedoms in the name of safety. And we have to be careful about this so that we don't lose our freedoms. And that's really important. And that's kind of why I'm not trying to get on the soapbox, but it's so important in all walks of life that if you want to maintain democratic freedoms, you have to exercise your rights, and you have to speak up, and you have to let people know that this isn't right, and you're not going to stand for it, and you vote for people who will hopefully do what they say they're going to do. I mean, there are people, charlatans, that will say one thing, get into office, and do another, and that discourages people. But in general, if you can find, you know, the right people to vote for, hopefully we start making a change, and we can create a movement around this, then we can make a change as well.
As I've already talked about on this channel, seems to be a war on manlyhood, on masculinity. And that's the whole point. Masculinity has become toxic in certain eyes, and we can't understand why being a man is so toxic at the first place. So, yeah, strange things are going on.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. Lots of our patients and people that watch the video made the comments, this is an attack on men, this is an attack on masculinity. And I think this comes out to the so-called culture wars, right? These culture wars that were instigated probably by both political sides, right? The left, the right, everyone. One group has some ridiculous ideas, and then the other group amplifies it to show how ridiculous the other group is, and this back and forth. But there does seem to be an attack on all things a bit more traditional, things the way things used to be, and maybe it's going too far in one direction where things just don't make any sense anymore. If 1 + 1 = 2, you'll get some group that say no, it equals 3 or another number, and I think that could be very frustrating. But this toxic masculinity, because I've been asked about this on other channels as well as on the Muscular Development channel, they ask, hey, what do you think about this toxic masculinity? And from what point of view, what do I think about it? I don't think it was an issue until it was brought up. They were trying to relate it to what do you think about it along with testosterone therapy. And my answer was, well, if you're going the route of saying, if someone goes on testosterone treatment and they become an asshole, chances are they're an asshole before they started the treatment, right? But no, the point is, if they're not a nice person before they start TRT, they're probably not going to be that nice of a person. But there are many cases when there are the people who aren't so nice before they start TRT. The reason why they're not so nice is because the testosterone is too low. They've got this hormone imbalance, and the testosterone will bring them back up to a level of being a really nice person. And we can see that with some of our patients who are very full of the anxiety, full of frustration, and the longer they're on treatment, the better they become, for the most part.
Yeah, amazing story. Thank you so
you,
much
Stephen.
for sharing all this, Mike.
Thank you for having me on there. Happy to contribute. You're doing great with the channel. And I like having the collaboration, because I think that's what it's about. We're all sticking together in the TRT community to create that awareness and kind of create a movement to what I call originally, I say it's the free the T movement, right? Let's free the T, and let's stop the stigma around testosterone, and let's make sure men and women can get their testosterone treatment, because it's just as important for women.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mike, for this incredible story, and let people know how to contact you.
Yeah, so please contact us at balancemyhormones.co.uk, or also visit my YouTube site, which is also Balance My Hormones. We're also on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and really all the social media, but the big ones that we've been focusing on is the YouTube channel, and we love having the collaborations with you, Stephen. So yeah, thank you.
I'll put all your links in the description of this video. Thank you, Mike.